Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to the best albums of 2024. Yeah, we are at that time of year. We're wrapping things up here. We're now into December and I'm going to do my annual countdown of the best new original albums from this year. So we're not taking into account things like best of, live albums, compilations, covers albums, box sets, stuff like that. We're sticking to albums of new original material from 2024. And I've narrowed it down to 20 albums that I'm going to rank here. And let's see if any of the albums that you guys are interested in make my list here. We're going to get into it in just a bit, but before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, if you turn on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool episodes like this with best albums of 2024. Now, I want to give you guys a little bit of stats here because back in July, I had filmed the best albums of 2024 so far. And I do this every year because we can't possibly get everything we want narrowed down to just 20 albums by the end of the year. There's so much great stuff that comes out. And so of those 20 spots, 9 have dropped off, which means we have 9 new entries coming into this list here. One of them was even a top 10. That one is completely out. So lots of great stuff dropped in the last 6 months, which has really changed things up here. It's even given us a new number one that is different from back in July. And so if you think you know what's going to happen here, if you think you know which way this is going to go, you probably don't. But hey, stick around and find out. And let's go ahead and jump into it here. So kicking off at number 20, we got King's X frontman Doug Pinnick, Thingamajigger. 6th solo album. This one here's got 11 tracks on it. Follow-up to Joy Bomb that only came out 3 years earlier, so that was kind of cool. But the part of this that really moved me was that I thought this was so much better than the King's X album that dropped a year or two back. And I was a little disappointed with that. It didn't just rock as hard as I wanted it to, but this one here, full on rocks the way that I would expect Doug Pinnick, King's X to do. So this album here ended up really moving me when I didn't expect it to, which is why it's appearing in this list here. Okay, next up, we got Swedish heavy metal band Lucifer coming in at number 19, Lucifer 5, 5th studio album. It's a female-fronted band with our girl right there on the cover. But it's also got Nikki Alexander, who plays guitar in the Helicopters. And so he co-writes the songs that are on here. If you're a fan of the Helicopters, then the direction that Lucifer has now taken is more along those lines. So it's kind of like a Black Sabbath influenced Helicopters sound. And I've really been enjoying that new direction that the band has gone on, both this album and the last album. Don't know if it was on the one before, but it's moved a bit more towards that. I think it has done wonders for their sound, and it really, it's kept me interested in this since it dropped, which was way back on January 26th. So the fact that this album here has held up for a full 10 months at this point, because can't really count January, can't really count December, but those 10 months, this album here has held up all the way through. So check that out if you haven't. All right, next one up was one of the last ones to get released. Former Guess Who vocalist Burton Cummings comes in at number 18 with A Few Good Moments. This one here, first album for him in 12 long years, and it's got 17 tracks. So really putting out the goods for us, almost like we're getting a double album. There's so much great stuff on this. And that's one I wasn't even planning on buying. It dropped. I thought, hey, I know who this guy is. Let me check it out. I streamed it, and I couldn't believe how good it was. I immediately had to turn around, order a copy of, and it kicked off an entire new listening experience, pulling out all these old Burton Cummings albums and Guess Who material and stuff like that. It just really moved me that much to dig back into all the classic great stuff. And I love when a new album can do that, when it can actually excite me so much that I actually want to just create a whole special listening experience around it. That's what that album did. Okay, coming in at number 17, we got former Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers guitarist Mike Campbell and his band, the Dirty Knobs, Vagabonds, Virgins, and Misfits. Came out back in June on the 14th. So this one here has been sitting pretty for the last 6 months, and it's still moving me the same way. This is his third studio album as the Dirty Knobs. Obviously, it's got tons more stuff under the Heartbreakers, but lots of cool guests on this one too, like Chris Stapleton, Lucinda Williams, Ben Montench from the Heartbreakers is in here. Graham Nash appears on here. So not even that it's just cool to have Mike Campbell be doing what he's doing, but there's so many cool guests that really just like elevate this album up a notch. And so there you go. That's why that's coming in at number 17 and been holding on since June itself. All right, next up at number 16, we got Russell Gunn's Medusa. On this one came out on January 12th, so it too has held the test of time for the entire year, and I love seeing that when albums that come out back in January still excite me as much as they do by the end of the year. That's just one of the hallmarks that you know it's been a great album and release, that it's not just that idea of new music that is putting it high up there in your mind, but it's actually so good. It's held up over all that time since it came out. And so if you don't know who Russell Guns are, probably should have said this right from the go. Jack Russell on vocals from Great White, who unfortunately we lost this year, so rest in peace, Jack Russell. Tracy Guns of LA Guns on guitar, put out by Frontiers Records. The cool thing is the rest of the lineup that's in here are other guys from LA Guns. We got Johnny Martin and Shane Fitzgibbons in here, and the whole thing rounded out by Alexandro Del Vecchio in here. All in all, very good album. Like I said, rest in peace, Jack Russell. I can't believe he gave us one last great album like this before he went out on top, in my opinion. All right, here's another one that I didn't know was coming out and then did not have any expectations for it. Had kind of lost interest in this artist over her last couple. And I'm talking about No Doubt frontwoman Gwen Stefani. Bouquet comes in at number 15. This is her 5th solo album, if we take into account the Christmas album that she's also released. But first album of new original material since This Is What the Truth Feels Like back in 2016. And the first 3 albums were really much more dance, R&B, hip-hop influenced style albums. Very, very pop in that sense. Whereas this one here kind of returns her more towards the rock side of things. Still a lot of pop influence, a tinge of country in there, but much more in line with groups like Fleetwood Mac, which she just fits perfectly right in with her vocal style and that kind of a sound. And so this album here just blew my mind right from the get-go. Opening track on here, right on through all the way to the end. I couldn't believe it. And it wasn't just how much I'm a fan of No Doubt and her voice and stuff like that. It was one of those things that I put it on and I just kept going back and back. And I'd want to listen to something else and then it wouldn't move me. And so I'd throw this one back on and it would just keep it going. And again, for me at least, in a lot of the ways that I think about these albums and how to rank them and where they come in is how much they moved me, how much they surprised me, how much it is that the sound of that and the excitement of that has held since its release. And so let's move on to the next one. Number 14, Alice in Chains guitarist Jerry Cantrell comes in at number 14 with I Want Blood, 4th solo album from him. Follow-up to his 2021 album Brighton, which was so good. I didn't really think that he could do anything along those lines, but this album here comes very close. I still think Brighton is probably his best work, maybe even better than the Alice in Chains material, at least the Reform stuff. But this one here, very close. This album holds up, I think, better than a lot of the later day era Alice in Chains material. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely would be worth checking this out. And since it's been since 2018 that we've gotten any new Alice in Chains, this here is going to have to fill the void for that in the meantime. A lot of cool guests on this. We got Duff McKagan, Robert Trujillo, Mike Borden, and both Robert and Mike did Degradation Trip back in the day. So it was nice to have those guys coming back in and doing stuff here. All right, coming in at number 13 is one of the ones that was there from the July, from the original era. And again, this one is just held up for me all the way through. So Grand Slam, Wheel of Fortune, came out back in June, and like I said, it's just held up. It's the second studio album from this group, even though the group itself formed back in the 80s and was known for having had Phil Lynott of Thin Lizzy as the frontman. But their guitar player, Lawrence Archer, who went on to play with UFO and some other different bands, reactivated the group with the keyboard player at the time, although he's not still with them now. We got a cool lineup doing this. So we've got Lawrence Archer on guitar, Rocky Newton on bass from Michael Schenker Group. Mike Dyer's taken over vocals. I think does a great job filling in for that unique style of Phil Lynott, although I think that he does a very good job on his own, making it his own unique sound, not just replicating what Phil Lynott does. And then we have Benji Reed on drums. But this album here, you would think, okay, they're just cashing in on the name sort of a thing. But I think they are trailblazing a path of their own. The last album that they did that had original material on it was also really, really good. So I wasn't expecting that they could possibly do it again here. And that first one was split like 50-50 in terms of covers of old songs versus new, whereas this one here is all new except one that they reworked. So it really shows that they have the goods moving forward to write classic sounding material, but it's new. And so I'm really loving this album here, and again, would highly recommend it. That one there was one of those albums that for a while I was recommending on all my sort of underrated lists and albums that flew under the radar kind of a thing. This is one of those ones that all year long I have gone back to and mentioned a lot of because I just think it is that good. All right, coming in at number 12, former Iron Maiden vocalist Blaze Bayley, Circle of Stone, came out back in March. 11th solo album for him, and it's comprised of two different sides. I like how they broke this down. It was kind of a fun way to do this album. Side A features 6 songs on it that are unconnected, standalone songs, you know, all their own. They deal with human frailty and resilience, courage, gratitude, kind of typical stuff that Blaze likes to sing about. But side B, which are tracks 7 through 12 on here, has a short story on it, so a concept. And Blaze is no stranger to that. In fact, the 3 previous albums before this were the Infinite Entanglement series that he did. So he's done a lot with concept albums and things, and it was kind of fun. 1, to get some standalone material, but 2, get a little mini concept album on here, and I think he just did it right. But I love the guitar sound. Blaze Bayley is probably, out of all the Iron Maiden guys, the guy that has kept the Iron Maiden sound alive. And in some cases, I know this might be controversial, I think he keeps it a bit more alive than even Iron Maiden does, because they've gone off into more of a slower, progressive rock sounding style mode that they've been in. But in terms of that fast-paced, new wave of British heavy metal sounding style stuff that Iron Maiden made popular, a lot of it, in my opinion, is what Blaze Bayley does today. And so I've been a big fan of his and really enjoyed the last so many releases that he has done. But this one here, I think, takes the cake on it. So check that out. All right, and as we wrap up numbers 20 through 11, the first 10 of this top 20, we have former Skid Row vocalist Sebastian Bach, Child Within the Man, came out in May. 4th studio album from him, or solo album, I should really say. It was his first in 10 years since 2014's Give 'Em Hell. And, you know, it's often one of those things, like when you wait 10 years for something, has it been worth the wait? And I think totally has been. This album blew me away. And while I think I still like the latest Skid Row album with Eric Gronwald on vocals better, because that has more of a Skid Row sounding sound to it, this here is some of the best work that Sebastian Bach has ever done. And I think definitely stands up to that. But if I have to pick between the two, that Skid Row album, definitely a little bit higher for me. But this one's so good, just right from the get-go. He returns to the rock sound that we know him from, that we love. And this whole album here just goes, you know, right for the throat, if you ask me. All right, so we're going to shift now down into the top 10 remaining albums, the ranking for this year. And starting in at number 10, we got former UFO vocalist Phil Mogg. Mog's Motel, it's the name of the band. It's a self-titled release debut album. Of course, we have Phil Mogg on vocals in here. We have Tony Newton on bass from Voodoo 6. We've got Neil Carter on keyboards, former UFO member, so two of those guys in here. Tommy Gentry on guitar doing an absolutely amazing job, and Joe Lazarus on drums. 12 tracks on here. And while I liked the later era of UFO with Vinnie Moore, it was a bit more bluesy and slowed down rock style than earlier stuff that really rocked out hard and had a faster pace to it. Well, this here returns. This has got to be one of the best UFO sounding albums that's not under the UFO name, and considering that Phil Mogg was the only original guy to be in all the different lineups, this really should have come out as a UFO album. And I think had it done that, it would have really put the cherry on top for the band. But at the same time, Phil said the band was done. It had been done about 5 years earlier, sort of thing, and decided to do it under a new thing, and not even under his own name. He's doing it as Mog's Motel. And I also think that's very cool. I hope he doesn't suddenly revert to his name and take away the band aspect of this, because it is just so good at what it is. But God, I hope we get more of this. I hope this is not the only one we get. You know, as all of our aging rockers keep getting older, you never know when it's going to be the last album. And I don't want this one to be the last one because it is so darn good. Okay, coming in at number 9, we have former Yes frontman Jon Anderson and the Band Geeks, True. This album came out in August. It's the debut recording for him with the Band Geeks, which features Richie Castellano of Blue Oyster Cult, although instead of playing guitar and keyboards over there, he plays bass in this lineup. 9 tracks on here, and I didn't have really high hopes for this thing, but this is just another one of those ones where I would have bought it regardless, because obviously I'm a fan of Yes. I'm going to buy anything that Jon Anderson does. But once I got it, it just really hit the spot the way that the Yes band albums had not been doing in the last few years. While I do like those, and I like the direction that Steve Howe has taken the band, I'll tell you what, man, they are sorely missing Jon Anderson in there and what he brings, not just his vocal style, but what he brings creatively to the band itself. And it's all here. So sort of like the Mog's Motel being one of the best UFO albums, it's not under a UFO name, this has got to be one of the best Yes sounding albums that's not under the Yes name. Really, really loving it. It's got a very classic 70s feel to it, and it's just super, super good. I do definitely think that it outdoes any of the last 3 to 4 Yes albums that they've done, maybe even all of the ones without Jon Anderson. Okay, coming in at number 8, we have alternative punk rockers, Green Day, Saviors, which came out January 19th, so another one that has really held on. It fell back a few slots, but it's still here, and it held up. And this is one of those ones, too, that while I've been a fan of Green Day, my interest in them has kind of waned over the years. But this album, when it hit, like restored that. It was sort of like, wow, where has this lineup of Green, or not lineup, but sound, energy, songwriting, like all of that, where has it been? Well, here it is right on this album. So if you too have felt that Green Day and their greatness has waned in the last so many years, I feel like it really returned on this album here, and definitely blown away the last one, Father of All, MF. That one, I don't know, it got lost in the pandemic, but it was just also not my cup of tea in terms of new sounds that we were trying to do, which was really more of a pop sounding style than what this is, which this is full on classic 90s era sounding Green Day, in my opinion. Just really, really good. Okay, we're going into number 7 here. We have grunge rock legends Pearl Jam, Dark Matter. This came out in April, and I mean, it was a great year for alternative rock. Green Day, we already had some Jerry Cantrell earlier, but man, this Pearl Jam album, much the same way. While I have enjoyed the later era of Pearl Jam, the last album, Gigaton, did not move me. It was interesting. It was great to have something new, but it sounded very raw unproduced in my opinion. It didn't seem to have a lot of energy in it. This one here just came back with everything I love about the band, right from the opening track on here all the way through. This thing moved me. This thing said, Pearl Jam is back. Here it is. So 12th studio album. It was produced by Andrew Watt, which I think has a lot to do with it. Andrew Watt has been popping up producing Ozzy Osbourne, Iggy Pop. None of the others are coming to mind at the moment, but he's worked with Rolling Stones. Right, so he's been working with a lot of big classic rock artists. And I kind of even think we should throw Pearl Jam in there because they've always had that 70s rock sound to them. And so I think he brought that element back to the band, and it was a cool thing. But I've really, really enjoyed this album since it dropped back in April. It's just been, going. And it's one of Anthony Coviello from Sound Exchange, one of his absolute favorite albums. You probably heard him mention it throughout the year as well when we've done our Sound Exchange session videos, but this one has held up. And here's another one that just did wonders for me. And interestingly, it dropped digitally 3 months before the physical, but we finally got this one on November 22nd physically, and I'm talking about the one that's coming in at number 6, Smashing Pumpkins, Agora Mora Mai. And it bugs me that nowhere on here does it say Smashing Pumpkins, and then on the backside we don't get track listing, nothing on here. But anyway, 13th studio album and follow up to their triple album Rock Opera, which was good. It was great, but it dragged on a bit too much. This one here, 10 tracks, and from the start to the very end, I do not get bored at all in this thing. The material that's on here is very much, in my opinion, a throwback to their 90s era sound. It's heavier, it rocks harder, it doesn't meander. In my opinion, it gets to the point. And for those 10 songs, I think it's about 45 minutes. I don't think it's much longer. As I said, I don't get bored, and I love that. So this one here, from the opening track all the way through, I loved that album. And again, would highly recommend that to anyone that has let Smashing Pumpkins slide from the bands that they're checking out. There's so many great artists have returned in the last 5 years or so that hadn't made albums for a while, or maybe their content had slipped and just wasn't what a lot of us enjoyed from their classic days. I think Smashing Pumpkins is one of those bands that, this is a personal thing, but I think they sound better today than they did back in their original heyday. And I still love those albums, but what they're doing now just moves me to a whole other level. Okay, coming in at number 5, we got rock and roll band, the Black Crowes. Happiness Bastards came out in March on the 15th. This is their 10th studio album and first new album in 15 years. Another one where I just didn't have a lot of high hopes because the last so many remaining Black Crowes albums towards their end were mellow. It might have 1, 2 great tracks, and then the rest of it just kind of meandered and didn't hold my interest. And this was one that from right when you turn it on, it sounded like classic era Black Crowes. Going back to their first 2 albums, sounding that good in my opinion, picking up where they left off and that sort of stuff. So not only was it a reunion album, but it was a reunion of their sound and where they pulled the rabbit out of the hat to be this good this late in their career after being gone for so long. I will never know, but it is so good. And 3 original members still in the group, or former members, I should say: Chris Robinson, Rich Robinson, Sven Pippen, because I don't know if he was original or not, but the rest is rounded out by other different people, but so good. Okay, we already had one former Iron Maiden guy. Well, we got the current Iron Maiden frontman coming in at number 4, Bruce Dickinson, the Mandrake Project. This came out on March 1st, 7th solo album from him. I'm still saying it's a concept album. I know there's been some debate about it, whether it actually is or isn't. Did he write the material and then the graphic novel was based around it? Or did he have a concept and they wrote the graphic novel behind the concept? Either way, these songs tell a story in the graphic novel, so as far as I'm concerned, it is a concept album. It's done with longtime guitarist and producer Roy Z. So you get that classic element sound that Bruce was doing with Roy back in the 90s, picked right up and kept going. I think Bruce has had a very interesting parallel career with Iron Maiden doing his solo material. And while it's been a really long time, first in 19 years, again, he just picks right up where he left off and did some amazing stuff on this. And I know a number of you guys didn't care for it and didn't think it was as good as recent Iron Maiden and whatnot, but I actually think this is a better album than the last couple Iron Maiden albums. For whatever reason, this one here moves me far more, and I found myself pulling this out all year long. Whereas in the last couple Iron Maiden albums, after the initial month and the newness wears off, I don't really reach for them. They don't stick with me. I don't remember them. This one here, I think about particular tracks and then want to pull it out and listen to it. Okay. All right, coming in at number 3, we have Metal Legends, Judas Priest, Invincible Shield. This one here was the former number 1 that got slid back. We have 2 brand new at the top coming after this. This came out in March, a phenomenal album, almost held on. I really debated it up until the end, but I had to slip these other 2 albums in because they just moved me even more. But this one here, 19th studio album produced by Andy Sneap, who also adds additional guitar. We still have Glenn Tipton playing on this album, despite his ongoing Parkinson's disease, which unfortunately is only going to get worse. So probably less and less of that as we go forward. But so far, so good. Great album. Great classic sounding stuff. I like it better than the last album. So again, it was one of those ones where I just thought they came back firing on all cylinders. And this album here, one of the best for this year. But these next 2 on here just went to another level, in my opinion. And this one that's coming in at number 2 came this close to being the number 1, but I decided that it was only itching for the number 1 spot based on my nostalgia for it, and probably not really the number 1, which I'll show you in just a bit. But this one here, Pink Floyd guitarist David Gilmour, Luck and Strange, came out in September. 5th solo album from him. Title track features his fellow Pink Floyd keyboardist Richard Wright, recorded before his passing as one of his Barn Jam sessions, or with David Gilmour as part of one of those Barn Jam sessions. They did this back in 2007. So that in and of itself right there already set this up to be a really great album. But I don't know what it is about this album, because it isn't overtly Floyd sounding the way none of Gilmour's albums really are that. But something about this album as a whole, and it is a fairly mellow album, which is one of the things that, for me at least, held it back. But from start to finish, I love this. I haven't gotten sick of it, and I can listen to it whether it's night, middle of the day. And once I start it, I just can't stop it. It is that good. Each song flows perfectly into the next one, creating a nice build up and movement throughout the album. But I love it. And like I said, though, it's because I think that I'm such a huge Pink Floyd fan, Floyd being my favorite band, that I was itching for this to be at number 1. But like I said, I don't know that it actually is that. When it really came down to it, the album that moved me more than anything that repeatedly stayed getting played, that held up and wowed me, as I did not think this could be the case with this band at this point, and based on, what happened recently within their career, and I'll talk about it in a second, is the reason this one is coming in at number 1. And I'm talking about legendary rockers, Deep Purple, Equals One. It came out July 19th, so again, it has sat there for 6 months, being that great to me. It is their 23rd studio album. It's first to feature a lineup change for them in 22 years, so that's what I was concerned about. First to feature brand new guitarist Simon McBride, who is from Don Airey's band. He takes over for Steve Morris, who had been there for 28 years. And so just with all of that in here, I thought they're never going to be able to do as good as with Steve Morris. And I love Steve Morris, but This album came out and rocked so hard and returned the band to the forefront of what I think it is that they do so great, creating such an amazing rock album. This late into their career with a lineup change and a sound change and just all those sort of things, and yet they're still coming out on top. It was mind-blowing for me how great this album was and what they were able to achieve with it, that I am so glad that they've done this and made this kind of an album at this point in their career. I just hope it's not their last. I don't want this to be the only one with Simon McBride. I want to get one more after this because this was so good. And I don't know what your number one is, but I'm loving this one here. Let me know what is your number one album. And so there you go. That is the best albums from me, at least, for 2024. Remember, this is just my opinion. If one of your albums did not appear in here, it's just an opinion. All right. If you want to know or compare to the best albums of 2024 so far that I did back in July, I'll leave a link in the description. You can check that out. I'm also going to leave a link to last year's 23 best albums of 2023, so you can see what I liked from last year versus this year. And just as a quick reference, the 9 albums that dropped off, which might be some of the ones you're wondering where the heck they are, right at 5, I ended up dropping the Bon Jovi. I love Bon Jovi, but that album just did not hold up for me in time. Kerry King, love it, but it just didn't hold up overall. Saxon was a great album. Vane, really good stuff. Got a couple glam metal bands in here. Babylon AD also dropped off the list. Sonic Universe was really, really good stuff that was in here. Newer band, Ace Frehley. I like Ace a lot, but in the end of the day, I just really felt that that did not sound like an Ace album. And a newer band called Gotus. All great albums, but ultimately didn't quite hold up over the course of the year, which is why they didn't make the top 20 in the end of the day. But as I said, just my opinion. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.